Tim Shepard and company were already waiting when we arrived at the vacant lot, along with a gang from Brumley, one of the suburbs. Tim was a lean, cat-like 18-year-old who looked like the model DJ you see in movies and magazines. He had the right curly black hair, smoldering dark eyes, and a long scar from temple to chin, where a tramp had belted him with a broken pop bottle. He had a tough, hard look to him, and his nose had been broken twice. Like Dally's, his smile was grim and bitter. He's one of those who would enjoy being a hood. The rest of his bunch were the same way. The boys from Brumley, too. Young hoods who grew up to be old hoods. I'd never thought about it before, but they'd just get worse as they got older, not better. I looked at Derry. He wasn't going to be in any hood when he got old. He was going to get somewhere. Living the way we do would only make him more determined to get somewhere. That's why he's better than the rest of us, I thought. He's going somewhere. And I was going to be like him. I wasn't going to live in a lousy neighborhood all my life. Tim had a tense, hungry look of an alley cat. That's what he's always reminded me of, an alley cat. And he was constantly restless. His boys ranged from 15 to 19, hard-looking characters who were used to the strict discipline Tim gave out. That was the difference between his gang and ours. They had a leader and were organized. We were just buddies who got stuck together. Each man was his own leader. Maybe that was why we could whip them. Tim and the leader of the Brumley outfit moved forward to shake hands with each of us, proving that our gangs were on the same side of this fight, although most of the guys in those outfits weren't exactly what I'd like to call friends. When Tim got to me, he studied me, maybe remembering how his kid brother and I had played chicken. You and the quiet, black-headed kid were the ones who killed that sock? Yeah, I said, pretending to be proud of it. Then I thought of Cherry and Randy and got a sick feeling in my stomach. Good going, kid. Curly always said that you were a good kid. Curly's in the reformatory for the next 6 months. Tim grinned ruefully, probably thinking of his rough-neck, hard-headed brother. He got caught breaking into a liquor store, he went on to call Curly every unprintable name under the sun, in Tim's way of thinking, terms of affection. I surveyed the scene with pride. I was one of the youngest there. Even Curly, if he'd been there, had turned 15, so he was older than me. I could tell Derry realized this too, and although he was proud, I also knew he was worried. Shoot, I thought, I'd fight so good that this time he won't ever worry about me again. I'll show him that someone besides Soda Pop can use his head. One of the Brumley guys waved me over. We mostly stuck with our own outfits, so I was a little leery of going over to him, but I shrugged. He asked to borrow a weed, then lit up. That big guy with y'all, you know him pretty well? I ought to. He's my brother, I said. I couldn't honestly say yes. I knew Derry as well as he knew me, and that wasn't saying a whole lot. No kiddin'. I got a feeling he's gonna ask to start the fireworks around here. He a pretty good bopper? He meant rumbler. Those Brimley boys had weird vocabularies. I doubt if half of them can read a newspaper or spell much more than their names, and it comes out of their speech. I mean, you can take a guy that calls it rumble bop action, and you can tell he isn't real educated. Yeah, I said, but why him? He shrugged. Why anybody else? I looked our outfits over. Most greasers don't have the real tough builds or anything. They're mostly lean and kind of panther-looking and slouchy. This is partly because they don't eat much, and partly because they're slouchy. Derry looked like he could whip anyone there. I think most of the guys were nervous because of the no weapons rule. I didn't know about the Brumbley boys, but I knew Shepard's gang were used to fighting with anything they could get their hands on. Bicycle chains, blades, pop bottles, pieces of pipe, pool sticks, or sometimes even heaters. I mean guns. I have a kind of lousy vocabulary too, even if I am educated. Our gang never went for weapons. We're just not that rough. The only weapons we ever used were knives. And shoot, we carried them mostly just for looks. Like Two-Bit with his black-handled switch. None of us had ever really hurt anybody, or wanted to. Just Johnny, and he hadn't wanted to. "Hey, Curtis!" Tim yelled, and I jumped. "Which one?" I'd heard Soda yell back. "The big one, come over here." The guy from Brumbley looked at me. "What did I tell ya?" I watched Derry going towards Tim and the leader of the Brumbley boys. He shouldn't be here, I thought suddenly. I shouldn't be here, and Steve shouldn't be here, and Soda shouldn't be here, and Two-Bit shouldn't be here. We're greasers, but not hoods, and we don't belong with this bunch of future convicts. I could end up like them, I thought. We could, and the thought didn't help my headache. I went back to stand with Soda and Steve and Two-Bit then, because the Sox were arriving. Right on time. They came in 4 carloads and filed out silently. I counted 22 of them. There were 20 of us, so I figured the odds were as even as we could get them. Derry always liked to take on 2 at a time anyway. They looked like they were all cut from the same piece of cloth, clean-shaven with semi-beetle haircuts, wearing striped or checkered shirts with light red or tan-colored jackets, or Madras ski jackets. They could just as easily have been going to the movies as to a rumble. That's why people don't ever think to blame Sox, and are always ready to jump on us. We look hoodie, and they look decent. It could just be the other way around. Half of the hoods I know are pretty decent guys underneath all that grease, and from what I've heard, a lot of Sox are just cold-blooded and mean, but people usually go by looks. They lined up silently, facing us, and we lined up facing them. I looked for Randy, but didn't see him. I hoped he wasn't there. A guy with a Madras shirt stepped in. "Let's get the rules straight. Nothing but our fists, and the first to run lose, right?" Tim flipped away his beer can. "You savvy real good." There was an uneasy silence. Who was going to start it? Derry solved the problem. He stepped forward under a circle of light that made by the street lamp. For a minute, everything looked unreal, like a scene out of a J.D. movie or something. Then Derry said, "I'll take on anyone." He stood there, tall, broad-shouldered, his muscles taut under his t-shirt, and his eyes glittering like ice. For a second, it looked like there wasn't anyone brave enough to take him on. Then there was a slight stir under the faceless mobs of the Sox, and a husky, blond guy stepped forward. He looked at Derry and said quietly, "Hello, Daryl." Something flickered behind Derry's eyes, and then they were ice again. "Hello, Paul." I heard Soda give a kind of squeak, and I realized that the blonde was Paul Holden. He had been the best halfback on Derry's football team at high school, and he and Derry used to buddy it around all the time. He must be a junior in college by now, I thought. He was looking at Derry with an expression I couldn't quite place, but I disliked it. Contempt, pity, hate, all 3. Why? Because Derry was standing there representing all of us, and maybe Paul felt only contempt and pity and hate for greasers. Derry hadn't moved a muscle or changed expression, but you could see how he hated Paul now. It wasn't only jealousy. Derry had a right to be jealous. He was ashamed to be on our side, ashamed to be seen with the Brumley boys, Shepard's gang, maybe even us. Nobody realized it but me and Soda. It didn't matter to anyone but me and Soda. That's stupid, thought swiftly. They've both come here to fight, and they're both supposed to be smarter than that. What difference does the side make? Then Paul said, "I'll take you." And something like a smile crossed Derry's face. I knew Derry had thought he could take Paul any time, but that was 2 or 3 years ago. What if Paul was better now? I swallowed. Neither one of my brothers had ever been beaten in a fight, but I wasn't exactly itching for someone to break that record. They moved in a circle under the light, counterclockwise, eyeing each other, sizing each other up, maybe remembering old faults and wondering if they were still there. The rest of us waited with mounting tension. I was reminded of Jack London's book, where the wolf pack waits in silence for 1 or 2 of the members to go down in a fight. But it was different here. The moment either one swung a punch, the rumble would be on. The silence grew heavier, and I could hear the harsh, heavy breathing of the boys around me. Still, Derry and the sock walked slowly in a circle. Even I could feel their hatred. They used to be buddies, I thought. They used to be friends, and now they hate each other because one has to work for a living and the other one comes from the west side. They shouldn't hate each other. I don't hate the Sox anymore. They shouldn't hate. "Hold up," a familiar voice yelled. "Hold it." Derry turned to see who it was, and Paul swung, a hard right to the jaw that would have felled anyone but Derry. The rumble was on. Dallas Winston ran to join us. I couldn't find a sock my size, so I took the next best size and jumped him. Dallas was right beside me, already on top of someone. "I thought you were in the hospital," I yelled as the sock knocked me to the ground, and I rolled to avoid getting kicked. Dally was having a hard time because his left arm was still in bad shape. "I ain't now." "How?" I managed to ask as the sock I was fighting leaped on me and we rolled near Dally. "I talked the nurse into it with 2 bitches switch. Don't you know a rumble ain't a rumble unless I'm at it?" I couldn't answer because the sock, who was heavier than I took him for, had me pinned and was slugging the sense out of me. I thought dizzily that he was going to knock some of my teeth loose, or break my nose or something, and I knew I didn't have a chance, but Derry was keeping an eye out for me. He caught that guy by the shoulder and half lifted him up before knocking him 3 feet with a sledgehammer below. I decided it wouldn't be fair for me to help Dally since he was only one arm. They were slugging it out, but Dally was getting the worst of it, so I jumped on his sock's back, pulling his hair and pounding him. He reached back and caught me by the neck and threw me over his head to the ground. Tim Shepard, who was fighting 2 at once, accidentally stepped on me, knocking my breath out. I was up again as soon as I got my wind and jumped right back on the sock, trying my best to strangle him. While he was prying my fingers loose, Dally knocked him backward so that all 3 of us rolled on the ground, gasping, cussing, and punching. Someone kicked me hard in the ribs, and I yelled in spite of myself. Some sock had knocked out one of our bunch and was kicking me as hard as he could, but I had both arms wrapped around the other sock's neck and refused to let go. Dally was slugging him, and I hung on desperately, although the other sock was kicking me, and you'd better believe it hurt. Finally, he kicked me in the head so hard it stunned me, and I lay limp, trying to clear my head and keep from blacking out. I could hear the racket, but only dimly through the buzzing in my ears. Numerous bruises along my back and on my face were throbbing, but I felt detached from the pain, as if it wasn't really me feeling it.